Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Love doesn't always begin with a glance. Sometimes it begins where the world is quietest, inside a silence so vast it swallows every lie and dares to awaken a kind of truth no one dares to name. Elara Monroe never dreamed of a fairy tale. She wasn't the chosen one, nor the cherished one. She was just a quiet literature teacher in Charleston who, on a pressure-filled June afternoon, was pulled into a wedding that wasn't hers. The groom was Cassian Holt, a former celebrity photographer now living in darkness after a devastating accident. He was her mother's dream, her family's financial solution, the perfect role her sister Sienna no longer wanted to play. Elara was forced to step in, to borrow a name, a perfume, a collection of memories that didn't belong to her. She walked down the aisle as if stepping into a haze, a plan carefully set to vanish in a matter of days. But what she hadn't expected was that inside the darkness Cassian called home, something began to bloom. Not a grand love, not yet, but something quieter, slower. Something that didn't need eyes to grow, only truth and time. Walk down the aisle, right now. Her mother's grip tightened around Elara's wrist. Ice cold, but her voice was a blade. In the cramped dressing room, dim lights couldn't soften the tension. The wedding coordinator's frantic knocking pounded like a drumbeat against her ribcage. "Sienna isn't coming," her mother said, every word a verdict. "You don't get a choice." The wedding gown glittered like a diamond-studded snare on Elara's frame. It was beautiful, suffocatingly so. No one had asked if she agreed. No one noticed her vacant stare in the mirror where a stranger stood, wearing someone else's life. Sienna stood at the door, arms crossed, face unreadable, carved from ice. "You always dreamed of being the bride, didn't you?" Her smile cut sideways. "So go ahead, play the part." Elara's name had replaced Sienna's on the marriage license. The dress fit. The only thing left was her walk down the aisle, to take the place of the woman Cassian Holt had once been engaged to. Cassian Holt, once a brilliant photographer, now lived in shadow. He couldn't see, but he could sense everything. For 6 months, Elara had practiced being Sienna. Her voice, her laugh, even her scent. She had become a perfect copy, or at least, perfect enough to deceive a man without sight. The cathedral flickered with candlelight. Stained glass shimmered like fragments of memory across the floor. Elara moved as if into an abyss, head down. At the altar, Cassian stood still as stone. His blind eyes were half closed, his head tilted slightly, glistening for something no one else could hear. The minister's voice rang through the vaulted silence. "Elara Monroe, do you take Cassian Holt to be your lawful husband, in honor, in love, and in duty, until death do you part?" She didn't look at Sienna, but she knew she was there, watching. Elara hesitated, her silence stretched. Then, throat tightening, she said, I do." Cassian turned his head slowly. His voice was low but deliberate. "Why are you shaking? Are you afraid I'll see you?" Her breath stopped, but the cameras caught only her forced smile as thunderous applause echoed. Elara reminded herself, just a few days, sign the papers, disappear. But under the golden lights and lies, her chest tightened. She had stepped into a role, but she wasn't sure anymore if she could walk back out. The Rolls-Royce Phantom glided down quiet streets, lamplight streaking across the windows like smudged ink. Elara sat beside her legal husband, a man she had never truly met, but whose every breath she had memorized. Cassian Holt said nothing. He sat upright, hands interlaced, eyes half closed as if asleep. But Elara knew better. He was listening. Not to the world outside, but to her. The rustle of fabric, the uneven rhythm of her breath, the soft click of her heels. He listened like a composer crafting a symphony from silence. When the car stopped before Holt Estate, a grand historic mansion on Charleston's northern edge, Elara stepped out as if sleepwalking. The gate opened automatically. The stone path was smooth, calculated. The house didn't welcome her. It simply stood, flawless, lifeless, untouched. Inside, the lights were dim. The doors glided open without sound. The flowers were fresh but scentless. Along the walls hung black and white photographs, landscapes, buildings, memories frozen in monochrome, but not a single portrait. A butler bowed politely. "Congratulations, Mrs. Holt." Cassie placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her toward the dining room. No celebration, no toast, just silence stretching over a long table set for two in cold, white porcelain. They sat across from each other. Elara rested her hands on her lap, steadying herself. Cassian broke the silence first. "Your voice, it's different." She flinched. "Different how?" "Softer, slower, a slight rasp at the end." Elara gripped the fabric of her gown under the table. "Maybe I'm just tired. It's been a long day." He nodded, then inhaled as though the air itself held secrets. "And your perfume? It's not the usual?" She swallowed. "I forgot to wear it." He didn't respond, but the silence between them thickened like mist. Elara forced herself to eat. The food tasted bitter. Cassian ate with methodical precision, as if every motion had been rehearsed. When she tried to rise from her seat, his voice stopped her. "Do you remember our first phone call?" She froze. "We talked about Paris, didn't we?" "I told you about Paris. You told me about your cello." Elara's hands tightened on the chair. She had never said that. That was Sienna. Cassian tilted his head slightly. "You once said you wanted to open a bookstore by the lake." "Oh, right," she replied quickly. "I did say that." He shook his head gently, setting his napkin down. "No, she never said that." She didn't move. Cassian continued calmly. "I have a very good memory, sometimes so good it makes people uncomfortable." Elara said nothing. She only stared into her glass of water, seeing not her reflection but the woman she was trying to be. And in that moment she realized the man who could not see was already seeing everything. Elara began waking up early. No more ringing the bell for staff. No more scripted commands she'd memorized to act like her sister. Instead, she slipped into the kitchen each morning and carefully prepared soft-boiled eggs, the way Cassian's former assistant had once said he liked. At first, Cassian didn't respond. He continued to sit by the window, as always, his fingers gently tracing the edge of the table as though measuring the world through touch. Then one morning, as Elara set the plate gently before him, he said softly, "She never made me breakfast." Elara paused, her hand still holding the spoon. "I know," she replied. "I just wanted to try something honest." There was no thank you, no protest, but there was also no distance. Just a quiet pause, peaceful, uncertain. Elara slowly began to change the house. She opened the curtains to let in sunlight, replaced scentless arrangements with lavender, white daisies, and fading peonies. She read to him in the evenings, not Bronte or Austen, but gentle, quiet novels. Stories with little philosophy, but full of feeling. One night, after she stopped reading, Cassian tilted his head. "Your voice, it's warmer. The way you touch my hand, it's different. Even your silence, it doesn't sound the same." Elara placed the book down. "Are you saying you know I'm someone else?" Cassian didn't answer immediately. He simply murmured, "If you are someone else, I think I might want to know you more." She didn't speak, but her heart beat faster, not out of fear, but because something had begun to wake inside her. She started taking him for walks in the garden. No cane. She guided him with her hand in his, walking slowly. When he asked, "Where are the orchids?" Elara froze. Orchids were Sienna's favorite, not hers. "I thought maybe today the other flowers deserved a voice," she whispered. Cassian smiled for the first time. Not a smile of comfort, but the kind of smile a man gives when he's certain the woman in front of him is no longer pretending. The reading room was filled with morning sunlight. Elara had just finished arranging a row of books, quietly breathing in the stillness she had grown to love. The room had once been sealed off, a silent shrine to the light Cassian had lost, but she had slowly brought it back to life with small touches. Open curtains, dried flowers, a warm cup of tea placed just to the left. What she didn't expect was that the next person to enter the room would be Sienna. No knock, no warning. She walked in like the house still belonged to her. Behind her, their mother followed, heels clicking against hard wood like a countdown. "We need to talk," her mother said flatly. Elara rose to her feet. "About what?" Sienna circled the room slowly, scanning every detail like an actress examining a set. She picked up a book, flipped through a few pages, then dropped it onto the desk with a sharp thud. "You're getting a little too deep into character," she sneered. "The maids say you make him breakfast, take him for walks, read to him every night. Seriously, Elara? Did you forget you're pretending?" Elara didn't reply, but this time she didn't look away either. Their mother cut in, voice like glass. "You really think he's going to marry you again? He loves Sienna, not you." Elara looked at them both. Her voice was steady, quiet. "He's not a transaction. He's a man, and I love him because he deserves kindness." Silence. Sienna laughed. "Cold and cruel. Love? You think you can love someone when the whole thing started with a lie?" Elara answered, her voice no longer trembling. "If he finds out the truth and he chooses to leave, I'll still know I did the right thing, because I never treated him like a possession." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then their mother whispered, slowly, like casting a curse, "Don't fool yourself into thinking this is love. You're borrowing a place that was never yours." The door slammed behind them. Elara didn't cry, but something inside her cracked, silently, slowly, like a fault line no one could see, but one that would never fully mend. Cassian didn't say it outright. He wasn't the kind of man who used words to make an impact. Everything he did was quiet, measured, like even the world needed time to catch up. That evening they sat together in the living room, 2 cups of tea steaming under the soft glow of amber light. Elara was reading to him, a short story not particularly profound but peaceful. When she reached the final sentence, Cassian spoke. His voice was slow, gentle, like a question that didn't need an answer. "You know, I'm going to Switzerland." Elara froze. "Switzerland?" He nodded slightly. "There's a doctor there. They're testing a new procedure. The chances aren't high, but there's still hope." The air seemed to thicken. Elara set the book down, her fingers curling into the fabric of her skirt. "You want to see it again?" Cassian didn't answer immediately. He turned his face toward the far corner of the room, where the light didn't reach. "What I fear," he said, "isn't that it won't work, but that it might. That I'll open my eyes and no longer recognize the world I once believed was beautiful." Elara wanted to say something kind or reassuring, something like, "I'll be there." But every word felt fragile. She said nothing, just nodded. "Once." Cassian leaned back into the chair. "I used to think the world was full of beauty. Faces, light, fragments of memory captured through a lens. Then I lost my sight. And what remained wasn't darkness. It was truth." Elara turned her face away, instinctively, as if avoiding his gaze, even though he couldn't see. What she feared wasn't the surgery. It was the light that might come with the truth. After that night, time passed like a thick novel no one dared to turn. Cassian didn't talk much about the trip. Elara didn't ask. But every day, she stayed beside him, quiet, steady, like the heartbeat of the house. Each morning, she made his tea. Each night, she read aloud. She never mentioned Switzerland, never brought up the surgery, as if silence might keep time from moving forward. But time didn't stop. It moved. Slowly, surely. When they arrived in Zurich, the sky was veiled in fog. Their hotel sat beside a lake so still it mirrored the clouds. Elara barely slept. On the nights before surgery, she sat beside Cassian's bed, her hand resting lightly over his, trying to remember every detail in case she lost him in the morning. Cassian remained calm. He said, "If it works, I'll open my eyes and see a new world." But in his voice, something faltered. And Elara thought, if he sees the truth, will he still choose me? The unbandaging day came 12 days after surgery. Zurich was blanketed in quiet snow. Elara sat beside his bed like every morning, but this time she didn't read. She simply held his hand gently, as if trying to hold on to a piece of something before truth walked into the room. Cassian lay still, his face calm, strangely serene. Elara didn't know what he was thinking, but she knew she had never been this afraid. When the doctor stepped in, time seemed to thicken. "I'll remove the layers one by one," he said. "Let the light do the rest." Elara nodded, but she wasn't sure if she still wanted the light. The final bandage fell. Cassian didn't open his eyes right away. Maybe it hurt. Maybe he was afraid. Or maybe because he had already seen it all. Then, slowly, he opened his eyes. No blinking. He just looked. And his very first gaze landed on her. Elara froze. Not because of that gaze, but because it didn't show any surprise. Cassian looked at her like he had been seeing her for a long time. "You're not Sienna." He didn't say it as a revelation. He said it the way someone names a star they've always known was there, just waiting for the right moment to be seen. Elara gasped. "When did you know?" Cassian didn't answer right away. He gently touched her hand, his fingers tightening as if they carried meaning in every gesture. "Since you called me Cassian, not in the way she used to. Since you told me about the bookstore by the lake, something Sienna never dreamed of. Since you said I'm sorry like someone learning how to be forgiven for the first time." Elara's tears streamed down. She lowered her head, covered her face with her hands. "Why didn't you say anything?" Cassian smiled softly, not bitter, not angry. "Because I didn't want the truth to make you run away. I wanted to see if I let you be yourself, would you choose to stay?" Elara looked up. "I lied. I lived under a name that wasn't mine. I don't deserve you." Cassian gently shook his head. "You were the first to place the T on the left side because my right hand is weak. The first to read not to impress me, but just to be near. The first who didn't try to change me." "Elara," he called, soft as breath. "I didn't need light to see you." And for the first time, he opened his arms, not to forgive, but because he had finally found the real person behind a world of masks. After the day Cassian opened his eyes, nothing unfolded the way Elara had imagined. There was no storm of emotions, no definitive ending, only silence, thick and unyielding, like a fog that clung to every corner of the house, to every breath between them. He didn't send her away, but he didn't call her by her name like he once had. He remained kind, gentle, and distant. A distance she could no longer cross. Elara found herself returning to the same place she thought she had long escaped from, the substitute. But this time, there was no more disguise to hide behind. And that frightened her. Not the light itself, but the clarity that came with it. The fact that he now saw her and still kept that distance. They lived under the same roof like two people who might have lost each other in another life. Every gesture became cautious. Even the lightest brush of hands turned into something they silently avoided. Then came a gray, cold afternoon. Elara sat alone on the back porch, beside a bed of fading white daisies. She didn't know why she had walked out, maybe because she could no longer bear the silence inside the house. A silence that now had weight, now had sound, now had meaning. Cassian stepped outside, not because she called him, not because he planned to, but because he too couldn't stay inside that silence anymore. And when he saw her, he stopped. They sat across from each other. No words. Then Elara spoke, her voice raw and unfamiliar, as though her own throat had forgotten how to hold truth. She didn't apologize. She didn't beg. She simply let the words come, trembling but clear, that she hadn't come for him, that it started with a phone call, a promise, a role she once thought she could abandon quickly. But then she had stayed for the stories she read, stayed for the nights she placed a cool cloth on his forehead when he had fevers, stayed for the tea she brewed quietly every morning, stayed for every small touch she never dared to name. Cassian said nothing, but in his eyes something softened, something shifted, a recognition subtle but unmistakable. And then he said, in a voice lower than usual, "You were the first person who didn't try to lead me anywhere. You just sat beside me and listened." That sentence made Elara close her eyes for a moment. She shook her head slowly. "I don't need your forgiveness," she whispered. "I just need you to see me for me." There was a pause, long, still, holding everything between them. Then Cassian stood, not quickly, not slowly, just with a quiet finality, as if something inside him had come to rest. He looked at her once more, then gently, with a steadiness that didn't force but invited, he extended his hand. "If you're still here tomorrow morning," he said, "then stay. Not out of duty, not because you feel sorry, but because I want to begin again, with you." 1 year later, in the misty hills of Oregon, a small center rests quietly beside a crystal-clear lake. On a rustic wooden sign carved by hand in soft curves are the words, "The Touch of Light." No one here calls Cassian Holt a millionaire. No one mentions his past as a once famous blind man. To everyone, he is simply Teacher Cassian, the gentle man who teaches blind children how to feel the world through sound, through touch, through the rhythm of their own hearts. Elara is beside him, no longer the substitute, no longer wearing someone else's name. Here, everyone calls her by her real name, and only that. She teaches literature and guides visually impaired students on morning walks around the lake, helping them hear the water, smell the wildflowers, and realize that the world isn't only made for the eyes. Mornings here breathe like quiet music. The wind moves softly across the cabin roofs. Sunlight filters through leaves and dances across the lake. Children's laughter rings like little bells. Elara stands on the porch, holding a book in one hand, watching Cassian under a tree, listening to a child describe the color of rain he has never seen. It's not a perfect life, but it's a true one. Sometimes, in the late afternoon, Elara still sits alone on the steps, remembering the path that brought her here. The lipstick, the disguises, the lies she once wore like a shield. But now there is nothing left to pretend. Cassian steps outside, holding 2 cups of warm tea. He sits beside her, no questions, no need for words. The warmth of his hand touches hers, not too tightly, not too softly, just enough to say, "This time, we chose each other, and this time, it's in the light." Somewhere far from Oregon, beneath the blazing red roofs of Florida, Sienna Quinn now lived with her new husband, a young, handsome senator, ambitious and adored by the nation. On social media, they were the image of modern love, powerful, polished, picture-perfect. Except, 4 months ago, a car accident had taken his sight. Forever. Since then, each morning, Sienna woke early to brew tea, pick out his shirts, guide his hands through color palettes he could no longer see. She learned how to describe a sunrise, learned how to read emotion not by glances, but by sound. The man, gentle, trusting, called her the light of his life, again and again, with absolute belief. And every time Sienna smiled, a smile that barely curved her lips, never reached her eyes. One morning, as she sat at her vanity, applying a shade of red lipstick, a habit now no one saw, her Bluetooth speaker crackled to life with the morning news. Entrepreneur Cassian Holt has received the International Humanitarian Award for his work with the blind community, alongside his wife, Elara Quinn, co-founder of the Touch of Light Center in Oregon. Her hand paused, the lipstick froze in midair, her fingers trembled, slightly, and then she laughed. No sound, no sorrow, no release, just the quiet drop of something inside her, falling and never echoing back. She set the lipstick down, lifted the tea, walked over to her husband and gently placed the cup in his hands. Then leaned close, her lips near his ear, voice low and soft. "I'm not the light, my love. I was never meant to be. I'm just the shadow that once stood in the wrong place and believed it was enough." No one heard it, no one judged, but something shifted. Truth doesn't always punish, but it always remains. Not every love begins with truth, but the ones worth keeping always end in it. If this story left something in your chest, a burn, a tear, a breath you didn't know you were holding, hit like, comment below, and let someone else find this moment too. Subscribe for more stories that feel more like memories than fiction. See you again, right here in the next one.